What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Adam Kownacki, 20 wins and 2 losses, taking on Ali Demirezen, 15 wins and 1 loss. This is the return of Adam Kownacki, who was a up-and-comer in the PBC stable, more or less, who was gaining notoriety. He's a Polish New Yorker, so he would often be fighting at the Barclays Center, building his name and reputation by beating increasingly high-quality opponents, from the lower tier to the mid-tier contenders to even Charles Martin, a former belt holder. So he started beating like Arthur Spilka, Charles Martin, stopped Gerald Washington in the 2nd round, and then had a pretty big showdown where he and Chris Arreola headlined a Barclays Center event. And in that fight between Kownacki and Arreola, a fight which Kownacki won via unanimous decision, we're talking like 9 rounds to 3 type of win, that fight actually broke the record for the most combined punches thrown and combined punches landed in a heavyweight fight. And in this fight, Kownacki landed more than 360 punches. But it ended up being one hell of a dogfight in the last couple rounds. Again, Kownacki won by several rounds, but Chris Arreola stuck around, came on strong, and basically did his share of drilling to Kownacki as well. So Kownacki passed that test, and then he hit one hell of a roadblock. First, in March of 2020, just about a weekend before the pandemic shutdown, and he lost to Robert Helenius. He was favored over Helenius, lost via 4th round TKO, and then about a year and a half later, we're talking October 2021, this is on the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 undercard, the rematch between Helenius and Adam Kownacki, and Kownacki gets beaten down, starts hitting with low blows as he's getting beaten down. So it was like every now and then they would tie up, and then he would land 2 or 3 shots to Helenius's private area. And this, again, was in the midst of Adam Kownacki just taking hellfire. Right hands. I mean, Helenius would sometimes start and lead with the straight right hand and then follow it up with a straight left hand. He was just blasting Kownacki. Kownacki eventually gets disqualified in the 6th round for those repeated low blows. But then they reversed that decision and they changed it from a disqualification loss to a TKO loss for Kownacki and a TKO victory for Robert Helenius. So this is his return to the ring since suffering his 1st and 2nd losses, both by stoppage and both at the hands of the 6'7" Robert Helenius. And it's kind of crazy because Adam Kownacki was knocking on the door to a title shot just before that. If you go rewatch his fight against Chris Arreola, they brought Deontay Wilder, the then longtime WBC heavyweight champion. He was a part of the broadcast along with Lennox Lewis. That was actually a very interesting and fun broadcast to listen to. And it's weird, Deontay Wilder's reputation has taken a hit in his 3 fights with Tyson Fury, and mostly how he handled the first loss to Tyson Fury in their rematch by him firing Mark Breland, blaming everybody else and making excuses for the way that he lost to Tyson Fury. But if you listen to how endearing and, dare I say, charming he comes across in the broadcast with somebody who he clearly admires and respects in the all-time great heavyweight Lennox Lewis, you just hear how friendly and how interesting their conversation and their boxing talk is during this Adam Kownacki versus Chris Arreola fight. It's actually worth a rewatch and a re-listen to the broadcast. It kind of paints a totally different picture of Deontay Wilder. He was a very likable guy before that rematch against Tyson Fury. And I think he earned a lot of respect back in the way that he fought that 3rd fight. But yeah, very interesting fight. But yeah, Adam Kownacki was basically seen to be one of the next guys in line for an eventual title shot against Deontay Wilder. And that Kownacki versus Arreola fight ended up just being, it really spotlighted how little head movement was shown by Adam Kownacki. We knew him to be a kind of a patient hunter who would jab his way in, try to pin you up against the ropes and start launching body attacks and, combinations, a nice straight right hand. But his lack of defense and, again, head movement specifically has always been one of those things where after the Chris Arreola fight, I was looking at Kownacki I see his punch volume, I see his punching power, but I feel like this lack of head movement is going to catch up with him. And I did a fight preview for that Kownacki versus Helenius 1 fight, and I picked Kownacki to win. I think I picked him by decision, but I said, hey, the writing is on the wall, so to speak. Like, he might pass this Helenius test, but that whole not moving your head thing is going to catch up with him. It just so happened it caught up with him a fight early in that first fight against Robert Helenius. But, the first time that I was really starting to have doubts about the sustainability of Kownacki's style was in that fight against Chris Arreola. So again, he got stopped back-to-back times against Helenius. Now he's about to fight Ali Demirezen, who's a pretty good fighter. He's not like a top-tier elite heavyweight. He only has one loss, but I mean, he started his professional career pretty late because of how extensive his amateur career was. I mean, he's about 32 years old, and his professional career just started in 2016. In fact, he was participating, or at least qualified, for the 2016 Summer Olympics. So he got his professional career started just after that. And his only loss to date was against Efe Ajagba, who was undefeated basically until we saw him also fight in that Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 undercard. And Efe Ajagba lost to Frank Sanchez. Back in 2019, this would be July 2019, this was on, I believe, the Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman undercard. Ali Demirezen fights the up-and-comer, but still kind of raw, as he is to this day, Efe Ajagba, and Ajagba actually beat Demirezen largely behind a jab. We know Ajagba to be a punching power knockout specialist. Like, there were a couple of knockouts that he scored like in 2020 that were highlight reel knockout of the year contenders. Well, Demirezen actually has a very good chin, and he's super durable, and he's a pretty intelligent fighter. Like, you could look at his build and underestimate him because he's built really a little like Adam Kownacki, a little bit more solid. Kownacki kind of looks a little softer in the body area, but Demirezen is a big boy, and he's not a fast mover on his feet. He's just kind of walking you down, but he's still staying out of like your most devastating punching range. Like when he fought Ajagba was jabbing him, but he was staying away for the most part of Ajagba's right hand. So he would basically look for counter punching opportunities to where when Ajagba would throw a jab and there wasn't a right hand behind it, Demirezen was often looking to throw something over the top to counter that jab. And since that one loss to Ajagba, Demirezen has won his last 4 fights, his 4 fights following that loss. And it was to Andre Mazanik, Kamil Sokolowski, Nikola Milacic, and Gerald Washington. And he finished Milacic and Gerald Washington in the 2nd and 8th round. And Gerald Washington, after that loss to Demirezen, most people are calling for Washington to retire. He's been stopped by a few people and hasn't looked great or even good, to be frank, in his last couple fights. So Demirezen, his skills and abilities don't jump off the page, but he is a high quality fighter with a deep amateur background. I mean, again, qualifying for the Summer Olympics, but he doesn't have crushing punching power. He's got good punching power, like his last 2 fights ended in TKO, and then early in his career, he was winning the vast majority of his fights by knockout, to where 12 out of his 15 wins have come via knockout. So he's not a slouch when it comes to punching power, but he doesn't have that dynamic put you out with 1 or 2 punches type of power. Neither does Kownacki. Kownacki is a volume machine. So what do I expect between Adam Kownacki and Ali Demirezen? Well, again, this is Kownacki's return after getting knocked out, stopped twice. Even though he didn't get dropped in the rematch with Helenius, he arguably took a bigger beating in the rematch than he did in the first fight, where he got knocked out in the 4th round, dropped twice on the way to a knockout. So these last couple fights for Kownacki have not been a good time. Like, his eye got so swollen up by Helenius in that rematch to where he couldn't see out of it after the first round, basically. And then he just got pummeled round after round beyond that point. And his head movement didn't look any better in the rematch than it did in the first fight. And you've got to question what his durability is like at this stage. Well, I recently heard an interview with him on, I think, Chris Mannix's podcast, and he sounded confident. He was saying all the things that you would want to hear from a fighter, but he also acknowledges that this is do or die. This is like now or never. never. A must-win scenario against Demirezen, because Kownacki's basically trying to make one more title run. Because again, he was knocking at the door before those back-to-back knockout losses. So Kownacki, the question is his volume going to be enough against Demirezen? And I don't really expect Kownacki to knock Demirezen out, because Demirezen is a very durable fighter with a good chin. Again, he went the distance against Efe Ajagba. Granted, Ajagba is not known to be the caliber, at least as far as we know, compared to Adam Kownacki, who again is beating Areola, Charles Martin. But yeah, against Charles Martin, against Areola, Kownacki wasn't doing a ton of head movement either, so I don't expect this leopard to change his spots, so to speak. I think that what we've seen is what we're going to get out of Kownacki. So what Kownacki said that he needs to bring back into his arsenal is the double jab to set up the power punches, as opposed to just maybe single jabbing, or more or less just walking your way in to then try to trap the guy and throw, your heat, basically. That's not going to work against Demirezen. You're not just going to walk in there, because again, he's an accurate puncher too. So Demirezen, he might look kind of slow, but his punches are getting there. Sometimes he throws them from deceptive angles, or at times where you're not expecting him to throw a hard overhand right or something like that. So Demirezen is a little bit of a tricky fighter. So with Kownacki, he is very susceptible to getting drilled by a straight right hand, by an uppercut. Like, he was getting hit by uppercuts, straight rights, and he will throw uppercuts of his own. Like, his punch output in his arsenal, he throws all kinds of different punches, Kownacki does. He will jab, but again, he said he wants to get back on the double jab. He's got a very nice right hand. He will rake you to the body. He'll throw two hands to the body, but his defense just isn't there. So what happens if this turns out to be a shootout, which I kind of think it's going to be? I don't think this is going to be a super measured pace type of fight. That's just not usually how Kownacki gets down. And if he is doing too much waiting, well, when Kownacki's waiting, he's not, again, moving his head. So he's either hitting or he's going to be getting hit. I don't see this being like a tit-for-tat chess match between Kownacki and Demirezen, even though I've seen Demirezen in some chess matches. Demirezen can slow it down and fight a more sweet science style of fight. Kownacki, he's the babyface assassin. He's coming after you with a two-fisted attack. So I think that his volume is going to carry the day. He simply throws more punches than Demirezen. I think there might be spots in this fight where he gets drilled or even dropped. I don't think this is going to be an easy fight against, again, high quality. No, he's not heavyweight top 10 according to Ring Magazine or anything like that, which Kownacki once upon a time, before those back-to-back losses, he was basically on those outskirts of the top 10, maybe 9 or 10 in the Ring Magazine top 10 heavyweights. But Demirezen isn't that, but again, he's a high quality fighter with that one loss. And I think that he is going to be very competitive in this fight, and he is going to have moments of hitting and even hurting Adam Kownacki, who, again, has a pretty good chin, but you've got to question how close to, pre-Chris Areola, Kownacki will say, how close to that chin his chin still is after, again, that dogfight where they set records for punches landed between Kownacki and Areola, and then obviously the two knockout losses to Helenius. Are we dealing with the same Adam Kownacki? I suspect no. So is that going to be enough? Is this slightly diminished or even drastically diminished version of Kownacki going to be enough to beat Demirezen? Well, I think that if he's a shot fighter, Demirezen's going to stop him. That's a possibility. Demirezen might knock Kownacki out. I just think that it's more likely going to be a case where it ends up being a high octane, lots of punches thrown, lots of punches landed type of fight. A little reminiscent of Kownacki Areola, but Areola was actually in very good shape in that fight. I think he hurt his hand at some point in that fight. But if you look at Areola's body compared to some other fights that he's had, he was coming prepared against Kownacki. He at least looked pretty fit, relatively speaking, by Areola's standards against Kownacki. Now, I think that Kownacki is going to look a little bit slimmed down too. I've seen some footage and some pictures of him in this training camp preparing for this fight against Demirezen. He looks like he's slightly slimmed down. I don't know if that's going to help his punch absorption necessarily, but it might help his endurance, might help his footwork. Again, he wants to be setting things up with a double jab to then be able to unleash the power punches. So I think he's going to find a lot of opportunities to let his hands go, and I think that at the end of the day, he's simply going to outland Demirezen. I don't think he's going to stop Demirezen here. Demirezen, I believe, is going to be durable enough to go the distance. I'm actually more sure about Demirezen's durability in this one to go the distance than I am about Kownacki's chin holding up. We'll see about Kownacki's chin and about his overall punch absorption and his resilience. But I think that the most likely scenario is that he outlands Demirezen and wins a 116 to 112-ish, 117, 111 maybe. So we're talking like 8 rounds to 4, maybe even 7 rounds to 5. I think it's going to be a competitive but somewhat clear decision win for Adam Kownacki. But again, I think that he might have to really dig deep here. I think he's going to get drilled with some shots, and that's going to be very telling, seeing how he handles this. But again, Demirezen doesn't have the punching power of Robert Helenius. But, you know, it doesn't take a Robert Helenius if you're landing with a clean right hand to hit a guy who's there to be hit and who isn't moving their head. Kownacki's defense has largely been his offense, or is it his offense has largely been his defense? I don't know. But Kownacki, I don't expect him to do a ton of moving around. I don't think we're going to get anything drastically different in that regard, but I am going to pick him to return to the ring in this must-win scenario, and I think he's going to pull out a decision win, a much, much needed decision win. But yeah, let me know what you think about the return of Adam Kownacki. Do you think that he's going to be a shot fighter coming in, or do you think that he has enough in the tank to be a pretty good Ali Demirezen? Let me know what you think in the comments, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.